Welcome back to the Morning Edition. It was a day the Bahamas will always remember as the country moves ahead in its political development. Majority rule marked a new era in this country, and tomorrow the country will pause on Majority Rule Day to reflect on where we are and the road ahead. Mukesh Lapinder joins us live with a special guest, Associate Professor of History, Dr. Christopher Curry of the University of the Bahamas.
Good morning, and Dr. Curry, welcome to Morning Edition. I know it's not your first time here in the studio, but again, welcome.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
It's good. As noted, it's a big day in the life of our country. From your perspective, give us a brief history lesson for those of us who weren't there some 53 years ago. Majority Rule Day, what's now considered Majority Rule Day.
Right, so of course this was a general election day. It was a Friday, and January 10th, after the results came in, we had a tie. It was 18-18. UBP at the time fielded 18, and so did the PLP. And so obviously, in order to form the government, there had to be some work to be done. And so actually over the weekend, what you had happening was both Roland Simonet, the leader of the UBP, and Lyndon Pinling, the leader of the PLP, were trying to get Alvin Brennan, an independent candidate who had won his seat for North Eleuthera, to come over to their side, as well as the sole Labour Party person who was elected, and that was Randall Fox. And so what ended up happening was both Randall Fox and Alvin Brennan came over to the PLP side. And as a result of that, Alvin Brennan became the Speaker of the House, and Randall Fox became the Labour Minister in the PLP cabinet. That was, of course, important because this was the first time that a black-led party in Lyndon Pinling became the government of the Bahamas. And so that ended minority rule in the Bahamas as we know it.
Now, considering that we've laid the groundwork for what happened way back when, tell us, where has the country come since then? 53 years since that transformative period in our country's life.
Yeah, I think a lot of changes occurred with majority rule. First of all, on principle, I think majority rule represents the heralding of a more democratic society. You have, for example, education that was before a privilege, where only a few persons could get into institutions of higher learning. And it was generally not an accessible ministry. And so education moves from being a privilege to a right. Mandatory from age 5 to 14, it's now been extended beyond 14 to 16. We also understand that you have a number of national institutions that are established as a result of majority rule. For example, you have the College of the Bahamas, founded in 1974. You have the Defense Force, established in 1979. You also have the National Insurance Board, NIB, established. You have the Mortgage Corporation of the Bahamas, established. And you have the Central Bank of the Bahamas, established. So a lot of these national institutions are born out of the majority rule era. But in general, you have the democratization of education and a more democratic society where a person is judged not on the color of their skin, but on the content of their character.
Now, that's the strides we've made. Where else do you think, where do you think the country should be headed in terms of continuing to grow over the next, will continue to grow, really?
Yeah, well, you see, a lot of people see majority rule as a singular event, and I always encourage people to think of it as a journey that isn't ending anytime soon. In other words, we must continue to work towards actualizing some of the aspirational goals that the Dream of '67 established. And so, yes, we need to enshrine democracy in certain things. Certainly, as it relates to gender equality, there needs to be some work. We need to make sure that we have a more equitable and fair society. We need to make sure the downtrodden, the oppressed, always have a voice and a place where their claims and their demands can be met. And so the challenge, of course, for an archipelagic nation like the Bahamas is to make sure that you have equity and equality across the archipelago. So, for example, when we talk about education, we want to make sure that persons that are living in Ragged Island or Actons or Crooked or Mayaguana have the same quality of education as someone in New Providence. And so because we have developmental issues across the archipelago, transportation, for example, and even local government, all of these things have to be worked on and developed and improved so that we have fair play across the archipelago.
What can be done to, I guess, get more Bahamians to appreciate the significance of Majority Rule Day? It's a day that is often politicized. What can we do to move away from that concept?
Well, I think it starts with education again, and our young people in our schools. We need to have a curriculum that focuses on teaching the Quiet Revolution. The bookends usually that we think about are, of course, the Burma Road Riot in 1942. And then, of course, 67, January 10th as a holiday, but then, of course, extending that forward to independence. That should be more robustly taught, I think, and given more attention in our schools. I think that we also need to move, as we're thinking about moving towards the 50th anniversary of independence, we need to also do some reenactments. You'll find students love when you can dramatize events, so I'd love to see a reenactment, for example, of Black Tuesday. I'd love to see a reenactment of the 67 election and the amazing outpouring of emotion that came with that. People were driving in the streets and celebrating and honking horns. And so we need to do more to dramatize the significance of the events. We need to have planned events as well. Anything that we can do that can draw attention to the significance of this watershed moment in Bahamian history.
That said, what are your closing thoughts on Majority Rule Day and what you'd like to leave with our viewers and also our...
Well, I think it's something that we should be celebrating. It's a significant moment in Bahamian history. It represents both a civil rights and a human rights movement. It also represents an international movement of decolonization that was sweeping across both Africa and the Caribbean. And so the Bahamas should celebrate this significant landmark in Bahamian history for all of the reasons mentioned.
Well, once again, that was Dr. Curry, the Associate Professor at the University of the Bahamas. Back to you, LaDawn.